Which players are rising the most in dynasty value? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy dynasty content. We put it out all year long. I'm a little bit late on this video. Usually I make these videos every single month around the beginning of each month. Keeping tabs on the market, who's moving up, who's moving down, so we know when to buy low and sell high, which is really the name of the game in Dynasty. But I wanted to wait until about a week after free agency before I made this video for March, just to get a better feel, because so much was going to change with free agency. And we use keep trade cut rankings, which again, I'll be the first to acknowledge it's not perfect, but at least gives you a good idea about how the market's going and how the perception of players is changing and how dynasty players feel about, certain NFL players. And we're starting off with the quarterback position. And usually the quarterback position is pretty stable. You don't get a lot of movement, especially at the top, the top 24 guys or so. But we do see CJ Stroud moving up from key trade cut QB 10 to QB 8, which is significant when you're already, moving up 2 spots when you're already in the top 10 is significant. I'm not 100% sure why of the move up. One thing I did want to say and talk about with CJ Stroud is just, it feels like, when we have to acknowledge this, that there's this giant bucket of quarterbacks, and I mention this all the time, this giant bucket of quarterbacks from like QB 6 to QB 20, 22, where any of those players could be better than the other for the upcoming season, right? Because of their lack of rushing, because they're not Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, or you're Joe Burrow, who's seemingly going to throw 40 touchdowns every year because he has two stud receivers and not a very good defense. CJ Stroud seems to fall into this giant bucket of guys that it feels like he's just going to be another guy, a low end QB1 at times, and obviously he's young and he could consistently be a low end QB1 versus some of these other guys. But would it shock you if Caleb Williams was better than CJ Stroud, if Drake May was better than CJ Stroud, if Bo Nix was better than CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, even guys like Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, who was better than him last year, if Trevor Lawrence finally puts things together and he has the right coach there, Jared Goff was better than him last year. Even, Dak Prescott, who's been better than him, it's been consistently a top 7 quarterback besides last year. Even someone like a Bryce Young, who does have probably more of a rushing floor than CJ Stroud. Would it be shocking? Maybe a little surprising, but like absolutely shocking? No. And so what it comes down to is like when I have the top of this bucket of guys, when I'm at the top of the tier, not to say that all those guys are in the same tier, but like when I'm at the top of a tier, and I think CJ Stroud and Justin Herbert and maybe Patrick Mahomes, those 3 guys are kind of at the top 6, 7, and 8. Do I want to tier down and bring in a bunch of assets, which I still think CJ Stroud can bring in a lot of assets, tier down, still get a quarterback that I can start who could potentially be better than CJ Stroud in 2025, and get a bunch of other assets to help my team? It's not out of the realm of possibility because CJ Stroud has at least shown that he's not going to run the ball consistently. He's just not going to run the ball consistently. Can he run the ball? Sure. Like we've seen games from him, in college and even last year, he ran for 59 yards against the Jets. Like he can do it. I just don't think he's going to consistently do it. I mean, he has a handful of games. Looking here, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of 10 yards or less. That's not consistent. So that's just my thought with CJ Stroud. Now, the one feather in his cap is that if he does have a good season, if he does have 35 touchdowns and 4,500 yards, people are going to remember what he did his rookie year, and he's going to potentially get into that tier of like top 5, top 6 quarterbacks, which, his value is he's easy to bring up. He's easy to rise up on. But again, just look at guys like Jared Goff. Like Jared Goff, who's been good for fantasy, good for the NFL the last 2 years, has thrown, 4,500 yards and 30-plus touchdowns. Even his points per game, he hasn't hit that 20 points per game threshold in 4-point per passing touchdown because he just doesn't give you any rushing floor. And that seems to be what CJ Stroud's going to do. Like the guy, but just play around with the possibility of potentially tearing down and really bringing in a haul of assets. JJ McCarthy, we see move up from 19 to 15. I think a lot of this has to do with them not bringing back Sam Darnold. There is rumors of potentially Aaron Rodgers wanting to be a Viking, and maybe that's going to be a possibility or whatever. Does that have legs to it? I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked, but I would be a little surprised. That being said, JJ McCarthy seems to be lining up to be the starting quarterback for the Vikings, and it's maybe the best situation in the entire NFL out there, right? Like, you have the right coach, you have three good weapons in the receiving game in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. Plus, you have guys like Aaron Jones who can catch the ball out of the backfield. I mentioned Kevin O'Connell. Like, we just saw Sam Darnold put up a really good year last year. Sam Darnold, who was QB 11 in points per game, QB 9 in total points. And I think JJ McCarthy could do something similar, maybe not year one, but we just need to see the potential. I don't know if McCarthy's going to throw 35 touchdowns, but I do think he can make up a little bit for it with his rushing ability. Darnold averaged about 12.5 rushing yards a game, so slightly above like immobile guys, but nothing consistent, nothing to write home about. JJ McCarthy can run the ball a little bit better than that, in my opinion. He ran, he didn't run for a whole lot of yards in college, but I do think he has a little bit more where he can give you maybe 350, right? Or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's properly ranked. I understand the rise here, and he's kind of in the middle of the pack of that bucket of guys that I just talked about with CJ Stroud. Justin Fields, from 29 to 26. I made a video pre-free agency saying guys to buy low on, and Justin Fields was on the list, and just saying, look, I think he's going to be a starter for a team. And when he's a starter, he's good. Like, there's a lot of quarterbacks where, in this range of quarterbacks where not only do you need them to start, like there's a lot of quarterbacks on rosters like that. Not only do you need them to start, you need them to be good as well, right? Like, Derek Carr is obviously going to start probably, but you also need him to be good. Russell Wilson, you need him to not only start at this point, but to be good. So he has two things he has to kind of overcome. Daniel Jones is in that list. Kirk Cousins, Will Levis, all these guys in this range. Justin Fields, you don't need him. All you need him to be is a starter, and he's going to be good. And there's a lot of value in that. Just last year, Justin Fields in his 6 games as a starter with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was the QB7 in those 6 weeks. He was the QB7. And he had 11.9, 11.4, 19.4, 32, 15.9, and 23.7. He led them to a 4-2 record. And he almost brought them back, if I remember correctly, and beat the Colts. And they lost by 3 points, and could have been, pretty easily 5-1 if other things went differently. So you've proven that he can win. You get him on a team where you have a guy like Garrett Wilson, you have Breece Hall, whatever other weapons they bring in, you hopefully have a good coaching staff in there with Aaron Glenn. And I think Justin Fields is still a buy low, even though he is rising up. Absolutely, he's a buy low. To me, if this guy starts 17 games, he's a top 10 quarterback. And there's almost no argument to it just because of his ability to run the ball. He doesn't even need to throw for 3,000 yards. I mean, just look at his season. Look at his season in 2022, where he threw his passing yards were. Was it 2022 or 2023? I'm just double checking here. 2022. His passing yards were 2,242 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. That was his passing stats there in 2022. And Justin Fields was the QB6 in both points per game and in total points. Really QB5 in points per game. So, he's going to be good if he gives 17 games. And who else do the Jets have at this point? Who else do they have? So he's still a buy low to me. Aaron Rodgers is also an interesting one because it sounds like he's going to play. Sounds like he has suitors. He wants to go to the Vikings. Vikings are maybe deciding on if they want to do that or not. I don't know what's happening. But then you have teams like the Steelers and the Giants that are waiting for Aaron Rodgers. So he seems to have his pick. And honestly, any of those teams aren't that bad for just pure fantasy value for Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings would be great. The Giants, you get Malik Neighbors and hopefully another weapon in there. The Steelers, you got DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth, as of right now, Jalen Warren. So, Aaron Rodgers last year, he actually had a pretty good year. He was QB 15 in total points and QB 19 in points per game. Like, that's not terrible. That's a QB 3 for your dynasty team in a super flex. And he's all the way down at QB 40. So I think he's kind of like, can you get him for like a late second, early third round pick? And would you be okay with that? Just looking at your dynasty team that's looking to compete this coming year, and you need a QB3. Like, it sounds like Rodgers is going to play. Now, maybe you want to wait until he signs, but if you do, he's probably going to go up in value a little bit. So, I think he's kind of a buy low right now. Can you get him as like maybe a throw in or as part of a bigger trade? He could be your QB3 pretty easily for the 2025 season. Omarion Hampton into the running backs. Now, this is the only rookie on this list, mostly because I just wanted to talk about Omarion Hampton. Moving from 11 to 9, and I know maybe not a lot of people, it's always hard with rookies knowing where to rank them compared to veterans. But to me, I've been talking about Omarion Hampton like he's my clear-cut RB2 in this draft. If he gets first-round draft capital, which a lot of people are speculating he will, especially after his combine, if he gets first-round draft capital, I think Omarion Hampton is the lock at the 102 in all Dynasty League rookie drafts. Superflex doesn't matter. I think he's the lock. I think he goes over Ted McMillan. I think he goes over Cam Ward. I think he's that good, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's just the best running back in this draft class. Mel Kiper just put out a mock draft. Genty goes 6 to the Raiders. Hampton goes 12 to the Cowboys. Do you think there's going to be rookie drafts where Hampton goes over Genty? Because I do. I think people are way more excited, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I think people would be way more excited about a running back on the Cowboys going 12th overall versus a running back on the Raiders going 6th overall. I just do. It reminds me a little bit of the Bijan Gibbs year, and Bijan was kind of the consensus 101, but you can make the argument that was the wrong choice and that Gibbs should have been the 101. So I think Hampton's that good. I think he's almost locked in at the 102. So if you're drafting, so this is a lot of you, some of you out there draft before the NFL draft takes place. If you can get if you can get Hampton, anywhere past the 102, I think you can get incredible value there. I really do. Kenneth Walker from 14 to 12. Kenneth Walker is always interesting because he just never seems to get talked about in the Dynasty community. I just don't know I don't think we know what to do with him. He's a good player. I mean, he's averaged, his first 2 years, he had over 1,200 scrimmage yards and over 1,100 scrimmage yards while missing a couple of games. Is he amazing? Can he catch the ball or something like that? Not necessarily, but he caught 46 passes last year in 11 games. I don't think people realize how many passes Kenneth Walker caught last year. So I'm just wondering, it seems like, by the way, that would have been a 17-game pace of 70 catches. It feels like Kenneth Walker could have an amazing season in 2025. He feels like one of those guys that could be dark horse, top 3 running back type of player. If that offense clicks and if they commit a little bit more to running the ball. Remember, Seattle was passing the ball a lot last year. And I think that's one of the reasons why they moved off of the offensive coordinator and changed offensive coordinators is because they wanted to run the ball a little bit more. And so I just think if they run the ball a little bit more, I think Kenneth Walker is much better than Zach Charbonnet. I think Zach Charbonnet has a role, but I think Kenneth Walker can do a lot of things that Zach Charbonnet just can't do, specifically explosive plays. And so I'm just curious if he's a risky buy because he hasn't produced at the level. We've seen him for 3 years now, right, Kenneth Walker? And in half PPR, he's finished as the RB16 in total points or RB14 in points per game. That was his rookie year. And then he finished RB19 in 2023 in RB20 in points per game. And then last year, he finished his RB28 and then RB14. So he's been right around this range, but we haven't seen potentially the top 10, top 5 season from Kenneth Walker. And we're all assuming it's there, but there's also a chance that Zach Charbonnet just takes over the job. So you got to be careful here a little bit. But I do feel like, I'm not saying he's a buy low or even a sell high, but it does feel like Kenneth Walker could easily have a dark horse, like top 5, top 3 running back season. And honestly, I wouldn't be that shocked if he did. Najee Harris from 33 to 25. The Chargers get their starting running back seemingly. And does this rule out the Chargers from taking a running back in round 1 or round 2 or round 3? I don't think so. They could still take a running back in day 1 or day 2. That being said, I would be very shocked if Najee Harris is healthy for 17 games or even for 15 games, let's say, that he doesn't get 220 touches this year. So let's just say he misses 2 games. He plays in 15 games. 220 touches is 15 touches a game. 220 touches in 15 games. 15 touches a game. I would not be shocked if Najee Harris is getting 15 to 17 touches a game next year, just no matter who they draft, unless maybe they get like Ashton Genty that falls to them or something somehow. That being said, I still think Najee Harris is going to have a role. Now, the contract wasn't as good as we originally thought, but Harbaugh likes him. Sounds like Harbaugh tried to recruit him out of college to go to Michigan and things like that. So I think what you have here with Najee Harris, at where we stand right now, is you're buying him at his floor, his absolute floor, right? Assuming that he's the starting guy for the Chargers. You're buying him at like his absolute floor, in my opinion, like with the Chargers. I mean, J.K. Dobbins last year, just for reference, J.K. Dobbins last year was the RB17 in points per game, RB23 in 20 in total points. Like, could Najee Harris just replicate what J.K. Dobbins just did? I think so. You're buying him at his floor, and you could get a sneaky top 15, top 12 season if everything goes right for Najee and they don't really draft anyone of significance. He can pass block, he can catch passes, he doesn't fumble, he's never injured. Those are things that coaches like. So Najee Harris, I think, he's still kind of a buy low, but I know why we're hedging our bets a little bit, because we still think it's a very good chance the Chargers take a running back. But if you can get Najee for this price, if you can get him for this price and willing to take that risk, I don't think it's a terrible thing. Maybe you get him a little bit lower than this price. I don't think it's a terrible risk, because you could really hit. You could really hit on a player that's going to be top 15, and that's a lot of value. It's huge value. It's a lot of value there. His old teammate Jaylen Warren from 43 to 33. He's kind of lined up. Jaylen Warren is. He's kind of lined up to be the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Like, this reminds me a little bit of like the Austin Eckler when he, took over for the Chargers back in, 2020, 2021, one of those years where he was kind of playing second fiddle to Melvin Gordon. We knew Austin Eckler was good. He was still usable for fantasy. We just didn't know if he could be the workhorse guy. And then he kind of became the workhorse guy for the Chargers. For a few years there, 2020, I believe it was, to 2022, he was one of the best running backs in fantasy. This feels a little bit like that, right? Jaylen Warren is the Austin Eckler. Najee Harris is the Melvin Gordon. They brought in Kenneth Gainwell. That shouldn't worry you at all for Jaylen Warren's sake. I guess the big question here, and we just don't know, is the bringing in of Kenneth Gainwell going to take away kind of his third down work, which is what kind of makes Jaylen Warren valuable, is his ability to catch the ball. And is he going to get red zone touches? I think the only other guy there that they have is Cordero Patterson. But Cordero Patterson isn't a terrible option to hand the ball off at the 3-yard line, right? Hand the ball to at the 3-yard line. Maybe he's a better option than Jaylen Warren. Those are the questions that are up. But, like, again, you're taking a gamble here, buying low on him. Also, the Steelers could draft a running back as well. You're taking a little bit of a risk here buying low on him, but you could also just be getting, like, if it's Jaylen Warren's backfield, like, he's going to potentially smash and be a top 12 guy. So that's the risk we take in Dynasty. I think he's still low enough to where I'm willing to take that risk. And even if he's not the sole guy in that backfield, I still think you're kind of buying him at his floor as an RB3. Like, I still think he's going to be a useful RB3, even if they do bring someone else in or draft someone. Last running back here is Aaron Jones, moving up from 47 to 34. Kind of talked about it, the previous 2 months of, like, these veteran running backs are usually buy lows. I mean, look at where Derrick Henry was before he signed with the Ravens last year. It's ridiculous to go back and look at Derrick Henry's ranking last year heading into free agency. I'm going to pull it up right now. Heading into free agency, he got as low as like the RB 36 in January. He was even lower. Yeah, about RB 36 is about as low as he got. Signs with the Ravens and he goes to RB 18. And then he got as high as the RB 10 or 9 last year. And now he's settling in at the RB 18. There's just always value with these veteran running backs. Aaron Jones is one of those guys, in my opinion. I know maybe some people are a little bit worried about Jordan Mason coming in. I'm not that worried because Aaron Jones, to me, like probably you don't want him to you don't want him. He had 306 touches last year. That was the most in his career. You probably want him more as like a 250 touch guy, right? You know, you want to drop those touches by 50 or so. Let's just say give Aaron Jones like 13 touches in 17 games or, 15 touches in 17 games. Give him 220 to 250. And I think that's probably a little bit better, less injury risk. And he's still efficient. He still averaged 4.5 yards per carry, right? He could still catch the ball. He had 50 catches last year and averaged 8 yards per reception. So like 8 yards per reception for running backs is pretty damn good. That's kind of like what the better pass catching guys can do. So I still think like numbers wise, you give him, let's just say 215 touches at 4.5 yards per carry. That gives him close to 1,000 yards. You give him another 50 catches, another 400 yards through the air, 350, 400 through the air. And you're looking at very similar numbers as what he did last year, which was over 1,500 total yards. And if we get the touchdowns to come up just a little bit, which maybe they do, he only had 7 last year. Could he get 10? We're looking at a pretty damn good player. So I like Aaron Jones. I still think he's a value. Obviously, he's becoming less of a value as he rises. He was all the way down as RB 47. I was telling people, hey, you should probably buy this guy because he's a veteran. He's a veteran, and people are always going to be low on him. They think he's dead. Yeah, he's a little bit older, sure, but I still think he could be an RB2, and he's still not quite valued there, in my opinion. By the way, it's his age 30 season this year, so it's not like he's like super old. JSN starting off, and I don't know why I wrote Sam Darnold there, but it's JSN I guess I was thinking about Sam Darnold on the Seahawks. It was moved up from wide receiver 12 to 10, and not a huge movement, but again, when you're already in the top 12, that is a pretty significant movement. JSN is obviously a really good player. He finishes wide receiver 10 last year. He is one of those players, though, where his total point finish and his points per game finish are very far apart. Sometimes you get those kind of players. In PPR, for example, he was the wide receiver 9 in total points, but he's the wide receiver 20 in points per game. That's a pretty significant drop off, right? So he was really more producing as like a low end wide receiver 2 than he was as a top 10 guy, which I know a lot of people are going to think, oh, he's a top 10 receiver. And I'm the biggest JSN fan out there. He was my clear cut wide receiver 1 in that draft class. I was telling people to buy low on him after his first year. I kind of feel like this is his ceiling a little bit. And I could absolutely be wrong about that. Like he could take that next step up, and Darnold could fall in love with him and hyper target him. Absolutely. I do think this team's going to throw the ball a little bit less. I do think they're going to throw the ball a little bit less. Again, last year, they threw the ball the fifth most at the 5th highest rate at 62, almost 63% of the time. I do think that's going to drop to sub 60. I'd be pretty surprised if it was, if there were more. I wouldn't be surprised if they were more middle of the pack, 50, between 55 and 58%. And that's significant, to drop off by 4 to 7% or so. So there's that. Cooper Kupp's there and MDS. Now, Cooper Kupp's getting older. MDS is MDS. But would I be shocked if Cooper Kupp and MDS had around the same amount of target share as DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett had last year, or maybe even a little bit more? I wouldn't be shocked. So I just feel like there's a possibility that JSN he's a good player. He's going to be consistently, top 20, top 15 even. And that's value. But at the same time, is he at his peak? And is he just one of those players that he's just slowly going to move down rankings, slowly and things like that? So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I wouldn't mind the possibility of tearing down from JSN because I do think he's potentially at the top of the tier. His old teammate, DK Metcalf, the new Pittsburgh Steeler. I think I made a buy low, buy low video either in February or January, talking about, buy low on DK Metcalf. And, obviously he's rising up a little bit and that makes him less of a buy low. But my argument with Metcalf was he was ranked around guys where it was basically saying out of all these guys, who do you think could finish as a top 12 wide receiver? Who has the best chance, right? And it was guys like George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf is who we're talking about, Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, and those guys still. So you have DK Metcalf versus, let's say, Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams. Those 6 players, including DK Metcalf, right? Those players, who would you say has the best chance of being a top 12 wide receiver? And I think I would make the argument, assuming everyone's healthy, because that's how you have to play, right? Assuming Jefferson's healthy for Addison, assuming Amon-Ra is healthy for JMO. I think it's DK Metcalf personally. Now, they don't have a quarterback, which is an issue. But if they do get Aaron Rodgers, then that even proves my point even more. So I still think, even though he has risen up, he's still kind of a buy low in the sense of, I think you could get a top 12 wide receiver if everything goes right for him, more so than these other players, again, like a Jordan Addison, a Zay Flowers, or Xavier Worthy. I'm not saying in a vacuum I would take Metcalf over those guys necessarily, but what I'm trying to say is, could you be getting a player that does have a top 12 season versus those other guys that are maybe seem to be a little bit capped? So just something to think about. Obviously, they need a quarterback, and everything could go wrong, and Mason Rudolph could be their quarterback. Ricky Pearsall from 39 to 34. And I understand it. You got Deebo Samuel's gone. Brandon Ayuk is being rumored to be wanting to trade him, but also he might not be healthy. I always forget that he played 7 or 8 games last year, because it just seems like he didn't play that much. So Ricky Pearsall seems to gonna be the one to benefit the most from all these moves. So you have Juwan Jennings there, maybe a hurt Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, CMC. Pearsall flashed a little bit at the end. I think he's a very good player. I just think where he's going, and especially in Dynasty startup drafts, there's a really good value there because, again, I'm always looking for players who has a chance to skyrocket in value. It's just like the stock market, right? It's just like the stock market in isn't there something intriguing about the penny stocks or something where it's you're buying something extremely low, and if it hits, it's going to skyrocket, and your value that you're gonna make is going to be tenfold versus maybe a more stable asset. It's kind of the same thing here. And don't take investing advice from me. I'm not an expert, obvious as it's pretty obvious. But you look at where he's ranked around: Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Khalil Shakir, Brandon Ayuk. With those first couple guys, Godwin and Evans, they're never going to be top 20 players ever again. Even though, I mean, in terms of the dynasty rankings, not in terms of their finish, right? Because look at Terry McLaurin, who was a top 10 wide receiver last year after the first couple of weeks. He's wide receiver 28 because he's 29 and a half years old, right? Mike Evans and Godwin are going to suffer from that. Jerry Jeudy, do we really expect him to get into that top 20? People are going to be skeptical unless he has a top 10 season. Tyreek Hill, same thing with the age, right? Khalil Shakir, Josh Downs, those players to me don't have the upside as Ricky Pearsall. So he's around these players that I don't think really have that possibility as being top 20 dynasty assets according to the community. And I do think Ricky Pearsall, if he just has a good season next year, he's pretty easily in the top 20. That's all it takes, right? So it's a risk, of course, comparing him to those players who maybe are more stable. But I like to go for, okay, who can skyrocket in value? And Ricky Pearsall seems to be one of those guys. Seems to be. A couple more receivers here. Chris Godwin from 43 to 35. And only thing I want to say about Godwin is I would be a little bit skeptical of just be careful. He's a 29-year-old receiver. Just turned 29, I believe, but he's a 29-year-old receiver who is coming off a pretty serious injury. I know he was great last year, but just be a little bit careful. You have Mike Evans there still. Obviously, Baker Mayfield, Jalen McMillan, a little bit younger. So could we see a slow start from Godwin? Could we see kind of a down year from Godwin? Sure, but he's also cheap enough to where maybe it doesn't matter. Josh Palmer from 91 to 72. And this one's a little bit of a head scratcher. Not the moving up, but the Bills signing him. And it's just like, really, Bills? Like Josh Palmer, he just feels like another like wide receiver 2/3 for that team. Last year they had Keon Coleman, Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Dalton Kincaid, right? All these guys who just like no one was really producing enough to be fantasy difference makers. Shakir was the best of them, but even he was like a wide receiver 3 type of player. And you just seem to add that with Josh Palmer. I know Mac Hollins is gone and maybe Curtis Samuel, I can't remember. But like you're just adding another player to kind of fall into that mix of guys. And I don't know. It's not very exciting. But, Josh Palmer's a good player. He gets open, which I think what teams really like about him. I know people were shocked about the $12 million per year, but to me, he gets open at a pretty good rate. Is he an amazing athlete or anything? No, but he gets open, and that's valuable. So, sure, I just don't really see him being better than a wide receiver 3 next year, and that's if everything goes right. Into some tight ends here. We have Evan Ingram moving up from 22 to 14, and I think this is fine. He is a little bit older, Evan Ingram. He's going to be 31 this year. He got injured obviously last year with shoulder injury. He's a guy who's going to get a lot of targets, but I don't think he's going to do much with it, and even more so as he gets older. I mean, the guy had 114 catches in 2023. He didn't even break 1,000 yards. That's really hard to do. So I just don't think he's really that great. Like in terms of, he's great at getting targets. And so that's value, especially in PPR. I think he's kind of appropriately ranked, if I could speak properly. But like, I don't expect like a top 5 season for an Evan Ingram or anything. Brenton Strange from 27 to 20, because of the Evan Ingram departure, is moving up. And sure, you could take a shot on Strange and a shot that he's going to be the starting tight end for the Jags. And that will probably make him a top 15 tight end or so in points per game or, in fantasy. That being said, I don't rule out the Jags taking Tyler Warren at the number 5 spot. I think Tyler Warren watch in terms of where he's going to go in the draft starts with the Jags at 5 overall. And there's not a whole lot of, I know people are like, really, a tight end 5th overall? Well, like, I don't think we would be that shocked if he went 10th overall or 9th overall. And so Jacksonville, who doesn't have the 9th or 10th pick, if they're saying, hey, we think this guy's a blue chip prospect at a position of need for us, why don't we just take him at 5? There's not many blue chip prospects in this draft class. Most of them, a couple of them will be gone before the Jags pick. So why not take Tyler Warren, a potential blue chip prospect at a position of need, even if it's 4 or 5 picks early? Well, we don't have 4 or 5 picks. We don't have the pick at pick 10. So we're just going to take him now. So that's the one thing I'll say about the Jags. I wouldn't be shocked if they went tight end 5th overall. Mike Gesicki from 38 to 28. I don't understand why he's not higher, to be completely honest. Mike Gesicki is going to be basically what he did last year. And what he did last year was he was the tight end 13. And he had that good stretch at the end of the year. He's the tight end 13 in total points. And that stretch at the end of the year where he had in PPR 10.3, 5.4, 6.7, 3.4, 18.6, 14.8. He was kind of just like a low end tight end 1 in that stretch. Like I think Mike Gesicki, although he's not going to be consistent, he's going to end up at the end of the year top 12 to 15 tight end. And so he probably should be a little bit higher. He kind of took over Tyler Boyd production, or 80% of the Tyler Boyd production. I don't really see the Bengals bringing in other weapons. They just paid Higgins and Chase a bunch of money. You have guys like Yoshi Voss, Jermaine Burton they drafted last year. I don't really see them dedicating their first 3 draft picks to a wide receiver. I'd be a little bit shocked. And then last one here is Michael Mayer. I kind of like the idea of buying low on Michael Mayer. He's moving up with the potential trade talks. The guy is still not even 24 years old. He was considered by a lot of people, the best tight end in that draft class a couple years ago. He was the 3rd tight end off the board, I believe. Obviously, the Raiders brought in Brock Bowers, and that just killed Michael Mayer. That being said, like if he gets traded, he could easily be a low end tight end 1 with the upside of like maybe something more. Like, so I kind of like the idea of bringing in Michael Mayer and buying low on him or getting him as a throw-in. So that is the Dynasty Risers. We will be back talking about some Dynasty Fallers in the next video. Appreciate everyone watching, and I will see you all in the next video.